Hello everyone, this is Loadout, and welcome back to DCS World. So, in today's video, we're going to cover how to set up the Mirage 2000C in the mission editor for missions, as well as some things that you're going to need to know as a mission designer and even as a pilot about your different payload options, how to set up the aircraft to deal with air-to-ground ordnance specifically, because there are some things about the payloads you can't do with other aircraft. And a whole bunch of other options like mixed radio settings, additional properties. Basically everything in here in the mission editor to get it set up, but also things that in here as a pilot you should probably know as well. So first thing is we have the waypoints here for the Mirage 2000. The Mirage 2000 does have an INS, and as with the INS system, you can set up to 20 waypoints to fly around in. Also to note, with the Mirage 2000C, you can set up a landing waypoint, and it'll actually be used, I believe, in part for ILS landings, as well as, I believe, even autopilot landings on airfields. So that is something you want to set up, specifically if you have the ability to in the mission editor. Setting up a landing waypoint will become very useful for those automated and assisted landing modes. Onto payloads, and this is where things get very interesting. Down here, you have on Pylon 11 is basically a fictional pylon. It is what is used by the game to set up air-to-ground training mode for the weapon computer system, so you can do training with air-to-ground weapons. It's a thing you can do. If you want to do for shits and giggles, nothing really useful about it in sim per se, but you can do that. Pylon 10, however, is where we start getting to the interesting bits. There is this feature back here at the end of the aircraft. This is actually the parachute for the Mirage 2000C, and if you leave Pylon 10 empty, you'll get to keep the parachute. So this does work as a drag chute for landing. And especially if you're expecting to come back with a very heavy payload, or you're not a very experienced pilot, having this drag chute to help slow you down when landing is very useful. However, if you're generally careful with your Mirage 2000C in the loadout, and you expend most of your ordnance and your fuel, and you're coming in relatively light, and you're landing at a long enough airfield, and you're reasonably skilled at landing, at least you're decent at landing, you're not going to have any worry. I don't want to worry about carrying the parachute. Instead, you can carry on a Eclair countermeasures pod. You have the old version of the Eclair pod, which is mostly in-game for legacy purposes. It's because older missions used it. It only has 16 flares and 16 chaff, which is nothing compared to what the actual Eclair M pod that apparently the real-life Mirage 2000 uses. Because the Eclair M pod has the option to carry way more flares and chaff. To give you a bit of a reference, the Eclair M42 configuration has 32 flares and 64 chaffs bundles, so that's double what the legacy Eclair has. So the Eclair M pod, by the way, these 0/6 up here, and all these different variations on numbers, or basically how much of the pod is dedicated to flares versus chaff. So on the one extreme, you can have 0/6 for 108 chaff bundles, or at the other extreme, you can have 6/0 for 48 flares. Now, of note with the Eclair M pod and countermeasures, the Mirage and its default countermeasure suite has a set amount of 234 chaff and 64 flares. This cannot be edited, this cannot be reduced, changed, or increased, or swapped in between those. It has a 64 count flare bucket, and it has a 234 count 234 chaff bundle bucket that it can use. Obviously, it can be refilled when you land, but that's it. Like, you cannot edit those amounts. Those are what you get with the Mirage, and that's it. As in terms of your loadout, in terms of your countermeasure options. So if you want to adjust the amount of chaff and flares, and if you're going to be on a Fox 2 focused server, or if you're going to be flying over an area with lots of manpads, picking the Eclair M6/0 for an additional 48 flares would be very helpful to get the flare count up and a bit more balanced, because as is, 234 chaff bundles is quite a lot. Now, the Mirage does have some countermeasure dispensing programs that do burn through chaff quite a bit, but you're still going to have 234 bundles of chaff is still quite a lot of chaff to play with, so I wouldn't worry too much about chaff. When in doubt, if you want more countermeasures, Eclair M6/0 48 flares is your safest bet. That way you have about 100 and so odd flares. But as is, even 64 flares is a decent amount if you're not expecting too much trouble, so you can always leave, especially if you're learning to fly the Mirage, leave the parachute on. It'll help you land. Once you get used to the idea of landing the Mirage, and if you feel more comfortable landing, go ahead and don't leave the parachute. You dismount the parachute and add on the countermeasures pod. 9 and 1 are your exterior wing pylons, or outboard wing pylons, and these carry either a Matra Magic 2 Fox 2 type missile that is similar to the AIM-9M Sidewinder. These are all aspect missiles. The Magic 2s are the all aspects. If you are familiar with the Mirage F1, the Magic 1s are rear aspect. But again, Magic 1s are only found on the Mirage F1. I will get to the DMM option down here in a bit. We also have the ability to equip rocket pods on the exterior pylon, and that's a whole other mess we will cover shortly. Pods here, we have the ability to also, on the exterior pods, mount... Hold on. Let's see, remove pylons. These smoke winders. And these are basically your smoke generators for air shows. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the DMM system here now. So, you can only... the DMM system here is attached to the rail of the missile, not the actual missile itself. And because the DMM system is a missile warning system that the Mirage has that's bespoke to the Mirage. The only other aircraft I believe that has a missile warning system is the A-10C. So if you want to have a missile warning system in your Mirage 2000, go ahead and equip the Matra Magic 2s with the DMM pylons. These are the only way to get the DMM system onto the aircraft. The rocket pods here do not have the option to equip them. And if you don't have any payload or any weapon on the exterior pylon here, you're not going to be able to equip the DMM system. So go ahead and slap on the Magic 2 with the DMM on here, and you'll have access to the DMM system. And to give you a little bit of a preview on legal and valid loadouts, basically every single loadout that the Mirage can carry will allow you to carry the Magic 2 missiles on the exterior pylons. So there's no real reason on all of your to not have the Matra Magic 2 DMM as your weapon on all your loadouts on 1 and 9. You basically always want to have this on all your loadout designs. The only reason you would go to the Matra Magic 2s, I believe, is if you're going to have a server that does not allow the DMM system. So in that case, you would just equip Matra Magic 2s. Now, like I mentioned with the rockets here, the rockets on the exterior pylons are interesting. A little bit more about the rockets. The rockets are effectively 70mm Hydra high explosive rockets that you would find on, for instance, like the Huey and a lot of the other U.S. NATO aircraft. So they're effectively 70mm rockets like your Hydras. Same effectiveness, good against infantry, lightly armored or unarmored units, especially against if you do get a direct hit with a lightly armored unit. That's usually always you're always going to deal damage to it. Good rockets, decent rockets all around. I do believe these are 17 count pods, and if you do mount them on pylons 1 and 9, um, you might only be able to mount Mantra Magic 2s on the inboard pods. I haven't really ever tried this configuration before to see if it's valid. This might be valid, but I wouldn't risk it. If you want to have just one pair of pods, your best bet is to put the pods on the inboard and then do your Mantra Magics on the outboards. This is this will definitely work for you. To note about the rocket pods, before we get into pylons 2 and 8, you can't. I do believe if you have pylons on 1 and 2, on 1 and 9, on 1 and 9, that's the only other way you can get rockets is on 2 and 8. And this, by the way, is a valid loadout. You're not going to be able to get bombs on this as well. So this, however, is an invalid loadout because with the Mirage, you cannot have mixed air-to-ground ordnance. You can only have one type of air-to-ground ordnance at a time. That means either one type of bomb or rockets. So this is a valid loadout. This might be a valid loadout with the Magic 2s on the inboard, but I wouldn't risk it. This is probably your safest bet if you just want pure rocket loadout. You will still have two 30mm cannons for engaging air targets at least, and you'll have plenty of rockets for air-to-ground operations. So I would definitely keep this. This is definitely a valid rocket option for air-to-ground attack with rockets. Definitely consider it. You're not going to have many options for rockets on this aircraft. Swapping over to pylons 2 and 8, like I mentioned, you can have rockets. This is the only other pylons you can have the rockets, and especially if you want to have the rockets with at least a pair of Fox 2s for self-defense. 2 and 8 are your only options for those. Also on 2 and 8, we do have fuel tanks. However, these are excessively large fuel tanks. They're 2,000 liters each, so you have an additional 4,000 liters of fuel in these very large, not quite aerodynamic tanks. But if you really need a lot of fuel to do a deep strike bombing mission, you can go ahead and use them. You still have room for pylons in the middle for different bombs, so don't worry about that. And that's an invalid loadout. This would be a valid loadout. But keep in mind that, yeah, that's a lot of extra fuel weight that you're lugging around. And you do have the option to air refuel with this refueling probe, so you definitely don't necessarily need all this fuel for most missions. And I don't believe most maps in DCS really need this kind of fuel load. You can, however, if you want to do practice air-to-air refueling, do this, and you'll be able to have. You can equip empty fuel tanks on the wingtips, so that way you can have an internal fuel load fully loaded, and then fly up and then practice tanking with empty external fuel tanks. For bombs, for the pylons 2 and 8, for your inboard wing pylons, you actually have the ability to mount Beluga cluster bombs, and in addition to Beluga cluster bombs, you have your Mark 82 low drag and high drag variants. So you have your Balut and Snake Eye high drag variants, as well as the French Stamp 250 kilogram bombs in both low drag and high drag variations. Your high drag bombs and the cluster bombs use CCIP bombing only, and that is a interesting feature of the Mirage, is that each bomb type also is limited to one bomb drop mode. So if you want to do CCIP bombing, stick to the cluster bombs and the high drag bombs. If you want to do CCRP, continually released, continue calculated release point bombing or level bombing, you will want to stick with the Mark 82 or the Snap 250 low drag variants. So keep in mind, low drag variants, CCRP level bombing, where you pick a point on the map and then the aircraft calculates the release point or the release timing. Or if you want to do high drag, where you basically kind of like what you mostly you'd think of bombing, You fly high up, you nose over, you nose down, and then you wait. You try to get the pepper onto the target to release the bombs. Then before your cluster bombs and your high drag bombs. Also, you have this AUF2 adapter, and the AUF2 adapter allows you to carry 2 of the same bomb type. So you can go for 2 cluster bombs, go for 2 high drag bombs, for instance, 2 Mark 82 bombs. So you can either carry a single bomb or a double bomb on these inboard wing pylons. Also of note, on 2 and 8, you can carry again an additional Mantra Magic 2 missile. Additional pair for additional total of 4 Mantra Magic 2s for your Fox 2 only servers. In servers that include Fox 1 missiles, you have the Mantra Super 35D, which is a Fox 1 missile equivalent to the AIM-97 Sparrow. It's a very good missile. I have gotten many kills with the Super 530. I do think that the Super 530, or at least I feel the Super 530 is a little bit more agile than the Sparrow. I seem to have a bit more success with it than the Sparrow, so highly recommend. I love the missile. It's very good. You'll definitely get a lot of kills against even larger targets with the Super 530. It's definitely very useful for taking out large aircraft like bombers and transport craft. And in fact, this loadout here, in its entirety, is your standard air-to-air loadout. I will cover on Pylon 5 the fact that you can equip on a centerline fuel tanks, and this is also another standard air-to-air loadout right here, but we'll cover that at the end of the payload section. What is interesting to note is with the next couple of pylons, 7, 6, 4, and 3, is that these are only able to equip bombs. However, of note, you cannot equip Super 530Ds with air-to-ground ordnance as well. So that's another invalid combination right here. So if you want to, if you want to go for air-to-ground ordnance, if you want to equip bombs on these center pylons here in the middle of the aircraft, I would just go ahead and equip at least an additional pair of bombs on the wings. That way you have enough bombs to make your trip worthwhile. That way you can make sure that you get enough ordnance on the target to destroy it, and also prevent you from carrying extra missiles that you might not be able to use. I do think this would still be technically a valid loadout with Force Mantra Magic 2s. However, if you're doing an air-to-ground mission, I would just go ahead and either do 8 bombs or 6. Just to make sure, again, you get enough ordnance on target to deal with it. Let's keep on this view. So 7, 6, 4, and 3 are, again, the 4 pylons here in the middle. Of note, 6 and 4, I think, are the front 2 pylons. And 6 and 4, in addition to carrying... No, wait, it's 7 and 3. Yeah, 7 and 3. 7 and 3 are the front 2 pylons. And in addition to the other types of standard bombs that the Mirage can carry, it can also carry on these 2 pylons a 500-pound laser-guided GBU-12. Now, this is very important. The Mirage 2000C cannot carry a targeting pod. You are entirely reliant on another aircraft to designate the target for you, or to have a JTAC designate the target for you. So, be careful on online servers or missions where you don't have a JTAC on the ground that can designate for you, or the game does not set up a JTAC through scripting, because otherwise these basically turn into Mark 82 bombs. There's no other way around it. You definitely want to, with these bombs, make sure you have a JTAC equipped, or otherwise you're just dead in the water. Now, we will note in the additional properties, you will set the laser code up here in additional properties. I will cover that again when we get to it, but 7 and 3 can also, again, carry GBU laser-guided bombs up here at the nose. And then 6 and 4, like I mentioned before, again, they can carry just your standard issue bombs, like the rest of the outer board pylons on 8 and 2 can. So I'm gonna make it interesting. I'm gonna keep these Mark 82 those GPUs up there as well, because of note on Pylon 5, Pylon 5 can carry, as you notice, it's a bit of an odd selection of bombs here. And that is because Pylon 5, even though it is the centerline pod, cannot carry any dumb bombs other than the cluster bomb. So you can carry a beluga on the centerline pylon. Otherwise, you are restricted to either carrying a single-mounted GBU-12 500-pound laser-guided bomb. You could carry the GBU-12 on a twin-rack AUF2 rack, so you can have a total of 4 GBU-12s. 2 on the centerline pylon, and then 2 on these front pylons here in the middle. If you really need to carry a lot of pain, you can go for a GBU-16 here on the center pylon here. Or if you need to do some bunker busting, a GBU-24 Paveway 3, 2,000-pound guided bomb. I would keep in mind, however, that I do think, however, I'm pretty certain that the 500 pounds bombs right here are counted as separate weapons from the GBU-24 and 16. So again, only stick to one bomb type just to be certain. You might be able to mix and play the laser guided bombs, but I wouldn't risk it. And again, with a 1,000 pound and 2,000 pound laser guided bomb, you need an external laser designation source. The Mirage cannot designate laser guided bombs on its own. Also, for quote-unquote bombs, you have the BAP 100 series, and these are anti-runway bombs. Basically, the bomb drops, deploys a parachute, and then once the bomb is pointing downward, it deploys a rocket, and it drives an explosive up into the ground. They're mainly used for runway denial. You can mount them in a single layer depth rack of 6, 3 across, and then 2 rows of them. Or you can do a double rack for 12. Or if you really want to carry a whole lot of them, you can go a rack. You can do a 3x3 size rack back to back for a total of 18 BAP 100 bombs. And these are used for runway denial, like I mentioned. They do create a sizable crater in the runway, even though they are a small diameter bomb, because it literally is driving. It uses a rocket motor to literally drive a warhead into the concrete. Other than that, other than the anti-runway bombs, the cluster bomb, and the laser-guided bombs here on the center-mounted rack, there is a very useful... Oh, and of course also your smoke pods. You do have the much more reasonable and streamlined, basically 1,300 or 1,300 liter fuel tank. This fuel tank is used in a lot of different loadouts because you're not going to be able to mount any kind of dump bomb here. You could easily have a full load of dump bombs, and then still carry a little bit of additional fuel. You can also, like I said, use this. This is a very standard air-to-air loadout as well, carrying an additional fuel tank along the center pylon. And like I said, in general, this is a very useful fuel tank. A lot of loadouts do use this to give the Mirage a little bit of extra legs for their journeys. Definitely very useful to carry along, I guess, on many missions. Although the Mirage does have a decent amount of internal fuel, this little bit of external fuel here is always useful. Do keep in mind, even if you do equip a centerline fuel tank pod only, you are going to have to switch the Mirage's fly-by-wire system to air-to-ground mode until this fuel tank empties. Once the external fuel tank empties, I do believe you can switch the fly-by-wire system to air-to-air mode. So that is something you will have to keep in mind. If you equip any air-to-ground ordnance on the Mirage or a centerline fuel tank, or even the wing-mounted fuel tanks, you will have to switch the Mirage's fly-by-wire system to air-to-ground, and the aircraft is smart enough to yell at you that your aircraft is in the wrong configuration. So that's pretty much it for your standard loadouts. Like I said, like I mentioned, this loadout here is a fairly standard air-to-air loadout. This is as well. Also note, I have created several loadouts here, but they use the standard Mirage definition. Like, this is actually a pre-made Mirage 2000C loadout. Alpha, for all the pre-made loadouts, stand for no external fuel tanks. Bravo are the two wing-mounted tanks on either side. Fox stands for a center-line mounted tank. And there's, like I said, those are the majority of your loadouts. So you can do, for instance, like that would be a Fox loadout. That'd be a Fox loadout. QRA is basically a center-line fuel tank and then two wingtip missiles. A clear pod here for a standard air-to-air loadout with the clear pod. And Kilo is basically all three fuel tanks loaded together. Not much you can do with this loadout other than equip two Matra Magics on either wings, and then like 4 bombs in the middle. So this is very much a deep strike Mirage loadout. You could also theoretically do this and have a deep strike loadout with 2 laser guided bombs. So let's also get over to the remainder bit of the payload panel here, because oh boy, was there a lot to talk about with the loadouts. Internal fuel is as standard. You can carry as standard 7,000 pounds of internal fuel. I do believe the Mirage uses liters for its fuel management system, though, so push it. That'll be a different number inside the Mirage, not counted in pounds. Weapons, 313 pounds. That is literally just the gun ammo. So you have that. It's, I believe, nearly impossible to exceed the Mirage's or hit the Mirage's max weight limit. Like, this is pretty much the only loadout that can, and that's because you're carrying so much fuel. Like, you're basically carrying almost the entire, with this Kilo loadout, you are basically carrying the Mirage's own weight in just fuel, which is an insane amount. So most loadouts won't carry that much fuel. Most loadouts won't hit nearly 100%, so you're good there. Like I mentioned earlier, you only are able to carry 234 chaff, period. You can't decrease the amount of chaff in the mission editor. You cannot also decrease the amount of flares in the mission editor. It's just always a set 234 chaff and 64 flares. Gun ammo can be set. And now it is the time to talk about the Mirage's gun. The Mirage 2000C has two 30mm DEFA, I think 355 millimeter. I think it's the DEFA 355 cannon, or forget the exact definition, but it's the DEFA 30mm cannon. It is actually a weapon pod that some other aircraft carry as well. I believe the C101 can carry the DEFA cannon pod. The Italian trainer that we got, the MB339 or something along those lines. I forget the exact name of it. But the Italian trainer that we also recently got also carries I think a DEFA pod with 30mm cannons. So you have twin 30mm cannons. They are not Vulcan cannons like the like most NATO aircraft carry. They are revolver cannons. So your rate of fire is going to be somewhat lower. But the 30mm shell that they carry is armor piercing, which makes this a very useful aircraft, believe it or not, for ground attack. Yes, 30mm armor piercing rounds will shred aircraft, but they will also shred a decent number of ground vehicles. Even moderately armored ground vehicles can be easily taken out by the Mirage's 30mm guns. So do not sleep on the Mirage 2000C if you need to do ground attack. Go in, do a bombing run with your dumb bombs. Try to take out any light units in an area or a convoy, and then on your second pass, switch to your 30mm cannons, and you can easily mop up ground units with the 30mm armor-piercing rounds. You can also have 30mm AP tracers. So you can either do armor-piercing or armor-piercing with tracers. Even with 30mm standard armor-piercing without tracers, you'll see the smoke trail of the rounds as they exit. One last thing about the 30mm cannons I should note, always put this at 100% gun ammo, even if you're just having fun with Mission Editor, or you kind of want to give yourself a challenge. You only have in the Mirage 2000C 125 rounds per gun, so you do have you do end up with a total of 250 30mm rounds. However, that is a very piddling amount of gun ammo. Yes, they are 30mm rounds. Yes, they will kill pretty much everything they hit, but with only 125 rounds per gun, you're going to run out of gun ammo very quickly in the Mirage. So always leave this at 100%, even if you feel like giving your players a challenge. So with that covers all of the weapons in the payload section. Also, last note, Civil Plane does what it always does with every single aircraft in the game, and it basically removes all weapons from the aircraft. I think it somehow also removed all the chaff from the aircraft. Yes, it did, and it doesn't let me put chaff back in. So be careful when you select Civil Plane with the Mirage 2000C training variant. Here's how we're going to solve this. We're going to do a ramp takeoff. And we're going to quickly just add those waypoints in. So, again, waypoints. You can you can have up to 20 waypoints for the Mirage 2000C. Always set a landing waypoint at tail end to help that way you can give the pilot the option to do use the assisted landing modes. Take it down to the player, and then there we get all the access to the other fun stuff. Triggered actions or mission editor stuff. This is route information. Navigation target points. I'm not quite sure if this is set up for the Mirage, but if it is, I do believe this is how you can set up offset point in the Mirage. I don't usually use offset points in the Mirage, or really in any other aircraft. It's not something you can really... I would much rather just use a waypoint and just put the target on the waypoint, but you can use this to use as separate target points. Failure modes, you can have all sorts of failures in the Mirage. When you have, for instance, hydraulic pumps, oil system can leak, a battery can fail, your transformer and alternator can fail, all sorts of fun stuff. Of note, the Mirage does actually have two radios. It has a UHF radio and a VUHF radio. I would, just as a standard matter of fact, always program your radios for the Mirage. I remember the Mirage does have a radio that, it has one radio, and I believe it's the green radio. I think it is the VUHF radio that can be programmed on the fly. However, the UHF radio cannot, I believe, be programmed in the Mirage. Whatever presets you have here for the UHF radio in the Mirage, or the presets that the Mirage is going to have, and that's it. So do keep in mind, if you're doing mission editing with the Mirage, be certain to include the UHF radio presets here and make sure that they are set up as needed, because once you're in the aircraft, there's no way to set these up in-game. VUHF radio, I believe, can be programmed and set to a manual frequency, however, so you don't have to worry as much about these, but in general, if you're doing mission editing, it's always nice for your players to have the radio channels preset up, so that way they're just wasting less time plugging in numbers. And this is a custom skin, by the way. The prototype skins are on the user files as and these were representing the Mirage's first prototypes. So let's go down all the way here. Set it up for the UAE Defense Force. So, of note, the Mirage does have a couple of special options here. These options up here, I believe, are able to be set up in the mission through the kneeboard menu. You can set the rocket burst count, so you can either have whenever you set up burst mode for the rockets, you can set it up to either fire 1 rocket, 3 rocket, 6 rockets, or 18. So okay, so there's our pods of 18 rockets each, not 17. There's our because that's a full pod right there. You can also set up the gun burst length, so you can either do a burst length for the gun. You can either set the gun to fire in burst mode, or you can have it just continuously fire as you hold on the trigger, and this is how you determine the length of the gun burst. Because, like I said, because the gun is very limited in ammunition, because you only have 125 rounds per gun, set this for 0.5 seconds, otherwise you're just going to burn through all of your gun rounds. And again, for your rockets, if you want to do, generally for rockets, you want to do 1 pass attacks, so you set this up to 18 for your maximum amount of rockets for your burst counts. If you want to do training, and you may want to set it to like 3 or 6, or if you're trying to tackle like multiple different targets all over the area, then go for a lower burst count. But if you're attacking a single group, go for 18 rockets. Just get all your rockets off in 1 pass. Down here you have, like so many other DCS modules, you set the laser codes either in the mission editor or on the ground, and this is how you set them up. So 1688 is your default laser code. You can set this to whatever you want. I do believe you can't set 9 for any digit. So you can set 188 or 17 or 777 or whatever you want to set up. But you set your laser codes up here. And once you take off, these are set. There's no way to change these laser codes once you're airborne. Waypoint Bullseye sets up the bullseye waypoint for the mission computer. So, for instance, I set the waypoint bullseye for waypoint 2. That means in the mission computer, on the radar display, it'll show waypoint 2 here as bullseye. So whenever waypoint 2 would appear on your scope, you can set it up to appear as a bullseye. And you can then use it to make reference calls from bullseye, or to receive reference calls from bullseye and get an idea on your radar where they are. Now down here, I believe, are all the other options that your aircraft gets that you cannot set up within the aircraft. These also, I do believe, appear in the special options for the Mirage 2000C. Enforcing INS drift. This tells the simulation to enforce the INS drift of the Mirage 2000C. So the INS will drift in the Mirage 2000C, and that's a real-life function, and that's a real-life attribute of the INS. So you can enforce the plane to have the INS drift enabled. This, I believe, overrides the player's option in their player settings. Aircraft is ACLM ready. This is basically your fast alignment setting. I would always have this enabled, just as a courtesy to players, especially on online servers. If you want to purposely have a mission where you're going through the full length alignment and the full-length starter procedure, go ahead and disable it. But for almost every other instance, just have it ready for ACLM alignment, and it'll save the pilot and yourself, if you're flying your own mission, time for aligning the aircraft. Because this, once we get into the startup video, we use this ACLM alignment for quick startup. You can also, by default, load a night vision goggle case. That way, if you're flying at night, you will have the ability to load night vision goggles in the Mirage 2000C. If you know you're gonna have the mission flying during the middle of the day, or you don't want to, or if you're trying to set this aircraft up for a time frame in which they don't have night vision goggles, or you don't just want to give them, go ahead and disable it. Then the player will have to contact ground crew to get night vision goggles, so they will still be able to get them, but they won't be preloaded onto the aircraft at least. Initial drift for in-flight start. This is if you have a airborne air start for the Mirage 2000C, and you'll be able to determine when the INS starts drifting for an air start. So I don't think this counts for ground start. But if you're starting if you're doing an airborne start for your Mirage 2000C and you have INS drift enforced, this will, or the player has INS drift selected on their own options, this will tell the simulation when to start that drift, or how long the aircraft has been flying around. And no, I think this simulates, my bad. This actually simulates how much the aircraft, I believe, has drifted. Yeah, this simulates how much the aircraft has drifted when you do an airborne start. So basically it simulates, like, for instance, this simulates no drift when you do your airborne start, whereas, like, for instance, 60 minutes would indicate that the aircraft has already been flying for an hour, so give the aircraft an estimated drift after, like, 1 hour. Enable TAF, or GCI link. Basically, this enables a separate radio panel that the Mirage 2000C never actually really had equipped. This is a experimental piece of equipment that was developed for Mirage 2000C, and I believe was tested with the Mirage 2000C, and it has, like, the slot built for it, but this was not standard equipment or really operationally fielded, but it was created for the Mirage 2000C, and it was fully implemented, and it was able to have this equipped. So if you want this optional piece of equipment, you can go ahead and enable it, and it'll appear in the cockpit. It's kind of, you do have to do a decent bit of setup in the cockpit to get the ground controller. This is basically a data link between the Mirage 2000C and a ground control station. And it's all entirely automated within the Mirage 2000C. Like, the Mirage 2000C gets the weapons information, and it's a very interesting system. However, unless you want to have a GCI link type of mission, it's generally not going to be useful in, like, a lot of single-player missions or a lot of online servers. Online servers will likely have AWACS aircraft, and you'll just communicate with AWACS aircraft and get your intercept data from them. So this isn't super useful. It's fun. It's a fun little option to play around with, but not very useful. And also we have here disable VTB export. I believe this is something that is related to displays. This might be an option to help you out if you have a display and you don't want to have that display going on with the Mirage 2000C. You do have to set up in the mission editor, which is kind of annoying, but you can at least enforce it here or not. So I'm going to go ahead and disable the drift there and not load the case there. So that's it for the Mirage 2000C for mission editing. Here we go. We renamed our group. So that's it for the mission for the Mirage 2000C for the mission editor for all intents and purposes. If I do target offset waypoints, I will come back here in the mission editor to show how to add them here for navigation target points. That might be something you added here. It might not be. And really, that's pretty much it for the Mirage 2000C. Again, main points I want to point out are, starting from, we'll go from left to right. The Mirage 2000C has a 20 waypoint navigation computer, so you can input up to 20 waypoints here on the map, and they'll all be loaded in. Make sure you set up a landing waypoint for the autopilot and other related systems for landing. For your loadouts, be careful. You can remove if you do not load anything on waypoint on hardpoint 10 or pylon 10 in the game, you'll get to keep your parachute. Otherwise, you can mount a countermeasures pod to get you some more additional consumable decoys like flares or chaff. Otherwise, if you want to be your safest bet is to always have Macho Magic 2s on 1 and 9. If you want to do air-to-air, put Super 530s on 2 and 8, or additional pair of Macho Magic 2s on 2 and 8. Otherwise, if you're doing air-to-ground, only have your Macho Magics on the 2 exterior waypoints, and then your air-to-ground ordnance in all the other waypoints. Also, if you need extra fuel, waypoint 5 is your external fuel tank. And that's about it. That's it for the Mirage 2000C, really, and I will see you all in the next video, where we'll go over starting up the Mirage 2000C. And until then, this has been LockOS, signing out from DCS World.